Our next session that we're going to jump right into, no breaks here, is talking about extreme weather, but using current data and best practices for wildfire risk reduction. So Elizabeth's comments there at the end are very relevant and very much in line with what we're talking about here. So what I'd like to do is this track will focus on using those best practices. We have 4 panelists with us in this particular session, and we'll hear first from NASA, from NASA's Wildland Fire Program that is focusing on proactive wildfire management, which is a new approach, basically, to put more remote sensing, modeling, and data to work. So Jessica McCarty is new to NASA, but not new to the Wildfire Challenge. And she's an associate program manager for NASA's Wildland Fire Program and is based out of NASA Ames Research Center as soon as she gets there. So Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today and for this conversation. For those watching, again, please enter your questions into the Q&A as you hear about a question that you'd like to ask, because they do get teed up and then we can address them. So thanks so much, Jessica. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. And I hope my sound is good.
You sound good, and we can see your slides.
Excellent. Yes, so I am an associate program manager with NASA Wildland Fire Management Program. I'm also the branch chief of biospheric sciences at NASA Ames Research Center. So, NASA has a whole NASA or one NASA approach to thinking about wildland fire, but not just as a problem, but rather how we can thrive with fire and solutions to that. So this program, Wildland Fire Management, sits under NASA's Applied Sciences, and it's a part of a portfolio of program areas that really tries to encompass the human experience on our Earth. So how to improve or how to use NASA science and technology to improve the experience of our home planet, basically. And wildland fires was, in a way, resurrected last year. For a long time, NASA Applied Sciences has had a focus in wildfires and wildfire applications, working intimately with other operational federal agencies who, it is their duty to respond to wildland fires, and also state, local, and tribal organizations. But last year, this program was made with the idea that we want to use NASA's fleets. So in partnership with our International Space Agency collaborators and partners to try to solve some of these management issues. So we want to, solve the impossible. That's what NASA is known for. We want to use our science, technology, our data, and modeling, the science for action. So how to manage and thrive with fires, how to have collective outcomes as envisioned by communities themselves. That means thriving with fire. Fire is not going to go away. We live in a fire-adapted continent, in a fire-adapted country. It's in our best interest, and it behooves us to learn how to thrive with fire. This adaptive fire management means sharing and co-developing scalable techniques and integrated system solutions, from thinking about launching more satellites that can respond to wildfire needs, but also thinking about how to use existing data and building new exciting science and technology to answer these science-driven management needs. And our priorities are really to think about not just projects, but tools and decision support to build communities of practice, and to have a wildland fire showcase. And in fact, we do have in partnership with Esri and the Actionable Fire Science Information Hub, where we try to highlight not just the programs and projects that we are funding, right, but also what we see as innovative and highlighting others across the wildland fire community. We work in this end-to-end innovation and integration system. So it's not just about observations. It's not just about GIS and visualization systems. It is linking these things with advanced modeling and risk analysis and assessments, and then thinking about how to make those computing and communication technologies open and transparent for all. This is really science applied. So we'd like to share this example of the WUI, Well, we know that by merging NASA's satellite technology and some of our modeling technology with socioeconomic data helps to do things like quantify defensible space, understand how invasive species are both adding to fire risk, but also to assess vulnerability of human and animal populations in the WUI. And we know that the wildland urban interface is one of the fastest growing land use types in the contiguous US. And so we want to be here to help quantify that, but also to think about how to solve some of the problems facing the WUI. And this slide at the bottom in orange, that's really where we are today, right? In terms of how we could use, NASA's innovation, co-production, and collaboration to ready new science and technology. We have some uncontrollable and catastrophic wildfires. We tend to do reactive, limited situational awareness with endangered landscapes and hazardous smoke and contaminants. And where we want to go is more like adaptive communities and infrastructure with predictive tools and resilient and healthy landscapes that mean safer air, water, and ecosystems, right, for the humans who live there and also the animals as well. And so this is really thinking about using all of NASA's Earth capacity to get us to the future that we want. But it's not just us envisioning it. We want to work with partners at the community level who can tell us where they want to get to. In our first year, one of the things that we have done is directed funding of projects that look at pre-fire, active fire, and post-fire, where we've tried to focus on human dimensions and fire risk, fire behavior and decision support, and fire risk itself, and then restoration and decision support. But in this coming year, we are anticipating a open solicitation where the larger scientific community, but also nonprofits, other agencies, and for-profits can apply and receive feedback and potentially funding from our program to work on this applied science issue of wildland fire management. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand it back to Dave.
Jessica, thanks so much. That's some great information, and we'll have some questions in the Q&A part as we wrap up this particular session. And again, just please, any of you who are watching that have questions, please enter them. So our next speaker has a lot of experience in the wildfire domain. He's with the National Weather Service, which is an agency under NOAA that is moving to expand its fire weather services. Heath Hockenberry it's great to see you online. We seem to touch on these in these online forums, but really great to see you and have you present on what the National Weather Service is doing to bring more services to decision makers and the public. Heath?
All right, thank you. I assume I should share my screen on this format.
Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
All right. I will do that just now. And okay. How are things looking on your end?
It looks great.
Excellent. Okay. Oh, this is a nice picture of me actually with my back turned, but when we're looking for exciting pictures, flames and people, you need to kind of pan out. So if you can see that little dot, there's some suppression actions there, dropped in some water. I was getting wet at the time. So that's kind of where I started in fire as an incident meteorologist, and from there went into program management. But I'm here today to talk about some of the things that we do and some of the future possibilities of our program and our areas of emphasis over the next 10 years or so. Our partners, obviously, National Weather Service on a day-to-day basis. We deal with the ground up to serve 5 federal agencies with an agreement, and then, of course, our close relationships with local and state services as well. So we span everything from county to individuals to geographic areas, and those GACs in the colorful pictures here do serve to distribute the large air tankers, the Type 1 crews, caterers, showers, the whole 9 yards through the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, where I live and work. Our Our services, if you're familiar with them, we drill from the seasonal outlooks down to the Storm Prediction Center outlines for slight, moderate, that kind of mimics and models the severe weather outlooks that are done for convective storms that are wet, but in fire regimes are generally dry, or there's some dry thunderstorms moving through. So our Storm Prediction Center in Norman highlights those areas. And then our 123 offices across the country have the red flag warning program. Red flag warning is obviously different than our other services. Our red flags are not out there to predict fire or fire movement, but the conditions that are really right for extreme fire behavior. And the criteria that we have developed, and there's a lot of criteria based on local fuels and local conditions and local needs, focus on the firefighter safety aspect and extreme fire behavior. We also have the red flags designed for emerging of new fires instead of the growth of existing through our dry lightning red flag warnings as well. We do a lot of these types of forecasts every year. We do spot forecasts from our offices, where a web interface for anybody that wants a spot that is deemed a emergency manager or public safety official. That public safety official can request a spot for wildfire, prescribed fire, spills, hazmat, search and rescue. We usually turn the forecast around in about 30 minutes, 25,000 on average per year. The last 2 years, we've been over 30,000. When I first got in 2005, it was around 19,000. So services are climbing towards, it has doubled levels. So when the spot forecast is not sufficient, about 140 times a year, we go out to the fires. We put on our Nomex, we camp, and we support fires as incident meteorologists. We're out there to be the single resource for the fire. Obviously, anybody with a phone or a smart tablet or whatever they have can shop for forecasts, can go around, but usually we have to be there to kind of make sense of everything that is happening operationally and all that people are hearing. I hear a storm's coming in 5 days. What do you think? Or we have a crew in this drainage. What do you think about that? So that's kind of why we're there, and we're accessible all the time. So again, we do that about 140 times a year. We set a record 2 years ago with 207 dispatch missions. Of course, we have the satellite. Our friends at NASA and NOAA, we partner to come up with the requirements. And then to observe these things, we send this information through NESDIS to our partners. And detection is a big deal, of course. And we're basically on the advent of using detection very much like we used radar in the 50s. Okay, now we're seeing stuff in real time. Let's go towards a future where we can integrate these detections and the growth and the radiative power to help modeling systems along. And again, a lot of these things are in their formative stages as far as modeling the fire behavior, but we're heading in that direction. We, 3 years ago now, I believe, instituted our high resolution rapid refresh smoke model. So the HRRR system now predicts three-dimensional movement of wildfire smoke. And that is a very handy tool when it comes to the other effects that fire brings to us, which unfortunately affects probably the most people, is the smoke. High split, obviously we can get trajectories, atmospheric dispersion. And along with those spot forecasts, anybody that requests a spot can also request a high split run, where the high split model projects the smoke movement. And here are the general categories for our spectrum of decision support through interagency partnering over the next 10 years. From the month scale down to the fire support scale, fuel status is big.
Hey Heath, we didn't, I'm sorry, we didn't see your slide advance. If you could try.
Okay.
And maybe
I'll try
click
it again.
hide at the bottom there to get rid of that text message.
Okay, all right. Did it correct?
No, it seems to be stuck on the satellite for monitoring fire slide.
Oh, wow. I've gone through 3 of them. Okay, let me restart this, okay? So I can.
Sure, no worries. And while Heath is working on that, I'll just mention to everybody, if you have questions, and I see another one coming in Q&A, if you have other questions, please enter them in, because NOAA is making some great advances on putting more data to work to serve the wildfire community. So if you live in wildfire prone areas, please think about questions you'd like to ask directly to Heath. He's from the Wildland Fire, or the Wildfire Program within the National Weather Service.
All right. Are you seeing my rapid resolution smoke image? No.
I see a message that you've started screen sharing, but nothing has come up yet.
Oh boy. Technical glitches. So I'm seeing it, and Zoom says I'm sharing the screen. So
Maybe just try it one more time, Heath. Stop sharing and then start again.
Okay. All right, I stopped here. Share screen.
And the message is up that you've started screen sharing, but we don't see anything quite yet.
Okay.
And that's okay. If it doesn't do that, that's okay. We can just use use your video, and you can talk the rest through.
All right. Well, obviously probability is a big deal across the month to hours, and even up to ignition time scale. Probabilistic lightning forecast, probability of the onset of red flag conditions. We're using social science experiments as well. We're designing some studies just to see how public perception of probability, what parts of the fire program lend themselves to being more understandable, more actionable through probabilistic forecasting, and of course the detections. Eventually getting down to fire behavior models that have fire scale warnings would be advantageous. And we're trying to move towards a fire environment approach, where it's not just weather, because of course fires aren't just exclusively weather events. They have to burn through stuff. And Weather Service typically has not been the expert on the fuels end of things, so it's a partnering opportunity. So I apologize, Dave, and to everybody for not, I don't know if it's my network. It could be, maybe, but I was seeing things advance and you weren't. So I love tech.
Yeah, I know you gotta love tech. No worries at all. And please stick around, Heath, because we do have some questions related to wildfires. I'd like to jump over now to Monica Stoffel. Monica is the executive director of the California Resiliency Alliance, and Monica's going to talk to us about how the California Resiliency Alliance shares information around wildfires, insights learned, and the broader picture of what's being done to help people access local trusted data. So Monica, thanks so much for joining us, and you can take the floor.
Thank you, Dave. And as he mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on kind of the connection with the local data, some of what's out there, as well as some of the challenges that are present. And I figured one of the best ways to do that is let's look at 2 examples, or a primary example from last year, and using a real life event. In this case, the mosquito fire on that. So there's a bunch of information at the national level that's focused specifically on this fire. For example, INCIWeb does great websites focused on every single fire that the federal side is involved in on federal lands. CAL FIRE here in California, for the larger ones, create short update pages for the fires that they're involved in. But then you often also have the counties or the local agencies doing their own websites. And some of the challenges here are that information starts getting distributed across these, and they might be updated at different time intervals, so that needing to check across multiple different sources. One of the great resources that we have here in the Western US for kind of getting that on the ground feel of what's going on with the wildfire, even if you're sitting elsewhere in the US or elsewhere in the world, are the Alert Wildfire webcams. And let's take a look at one. This is the Bunker Hill, obviously not a fire scene right now, but you can literally look out and see what's around. You can take a look. We can go over here, jump to other cameras and take a look in those views. You can scroll out and you can see how many different cameras there are. And this is now across kind of the Western US. Density varies by area, but this is a great tool to kind of get a sense of what's going on the ground, getting that distance view on the wildfire smoke plumes. So I wanted to share that one. Evacuation maps. This is one of the biggest challenges. And for those of you who've worked with incidents spanning across multiple jurisdictions, you'll often find sometimes there's a high level, maybe the state does a statewide evacuation map depending on where you're operating. Here in California, we don't have a state level. At best, we have county level maps, unless they use the zone haven, which kind of helps cluster some of those together. So often for these cross-jurisdictional events, people are needing to go to multiple sites again, and maps might not use the same URL for every single fire in a county. They might set up individual URLs, adding to the complexity of now needing to find, okay, where is this map located now? The bookmark you saved, no longer valid. So that's one of the things that I try and do is bring this together, but it's also one of the challenges. Going even further, some counties don't even bring it together at the county level. They let every single city jurisdiction do their own evacuation map. So you can imagine how this multiplies out in trying to get a big picture of what are the evacuations. Demographic data. This is one that people often forget about. And often we'll use rounding numbers of, oh, let's use the average number of persons per household for the state or the national average. But as you can see here, numbers can vary in these small decimal point differences. Once you start multiplying by 1,000, 10,000, 40,000, start accumulating different numbers in terms of people evacuating. So it's kind of paying attention to the demographic data as well that gets pulled together here. Something else is the infrastructure aspect. Here, this map no longer shows the fire perimeter because it shifted over to the 2023 map, which no longer has last year's fire. But thinking about how does the fire interact with infrastructure? Because one of the things that some in emergency management look at, business continuity, and I know from my members, they have that understanding that something might be happening here and affect this transmission line, but where does that go to and what does that mean for the lines that are dependent on that transmission line? So starting to look more cross-system, starting to look across broader geographies for local wildfires. There's also a lot of information that's available in terms of infrastructure impacts, but again, distributed across different resources. Different links. Here in California, we have the challenge that with road closures, you have Caltrans does a great job and has their quick map that talks about all of the state level closures, but then the counties cover all the county roads and the cities cover the city roads. So you might have multiple different locations you have to look to get an understanding of what are the road closures in relationship to a wildfire. So bringing some of that together becomes key. We also think about what's the movement of freight and goods. This fire didn't impact any rail, but I'll also bring in rail if that's a line that becomes impacted. wildfire smoke. This is something that spans across wide jurisdictions. And one of the things I wanted to highlight here, and this is regardless of where you are in the US, if there's a larger wildfire that's having a heavy smoke impact, the Interagency Wildfire Air Quality Response Program actually does local forecasts and outlooks on kind of smoke movement, where is it going to be impacted. Right now, the website's kind of boring. Luckily, we don't have any major wildfires burning right now. If something comes up, there'll be a map here that kind of borders, okay, this outlook does this geographical area, and you can click on it and it gives you that entire outlook updated daily. And so you can find some more information on how is smoke to behave in terms of impact on air quality and health in different regions. Also, that look on local data in terms of what are the fire conditions in terms of fuel moistures, the burning index, the 100-hour fuel outlook, and you can even do 10-hour or 1,000-hour on that. But what does that mean, and what does that tell us in terms of the potential fire activity in that region for it to spread? And along with that is the weather of what's the temperature and the wind. And now looking kind of at the social media, which adds to both making things much easier to find and great in videos and briefings and information sharing, but also creates the challenges because it gets spread out across so many different platforms, across so many different agencies. For example, with this fire, the mosquito fire, there were updates both from CAL FIRE and the National Forest Service, and they might have different information at different times about the same fire because they're approaching it from slightly different perspectives in terms of what is the impact to the federal lands, what's the impact to kind of the state and the CAL FIRE's response. And then you have the different counties kind of doing their own updates and information sharing. And so going through all of those different layers. Scroll down. And in regards to social media, one of the things I wanted to highlight is some counties just are posting now their evacuation information on Facebook or Twitter, which means monitoring that to try and keep up on what's the latest, becoming challenged because it can get buried in a feed pretty quickly. In terms of looking out ahead and some planning on local resources, here in California, we have the high fire threat districts, which is a map that the California Public Utilities Commission with CAL FIRE puts together in terms of what areas in California have high fire threat, kind of the high and the medium tier, so people can see that urban wildland interface really well. We also have here, and actually this is something that most weather offices have, but often very hidden. This is the fire weather snooper shown across all of the weather stations in California, and which ones are kind of flirting with wildfire conditions, not taking into account all metrics, but where temperature, wind speeds or so can hit certain trigger points. In the summer, when you know that fuel moistures are going to be lower, this might be a great way to quickly scan where are locations that I need to keep a bigger eye on. And then we also have the California hourly fire danger map. Right now, looks really nice, kind of boring, very green. We'd love to see this throughout the summer. Sadly, that's not the case. But again, this is another resource to kind of get that big picture planning on what areas do I need to pay attention to in terms of wildfire threat. You can perhaps log in, see, okay, here's a geographical area that is coming up in color scale. You need to pay attention more to that. You can also go forward in time and kind of get that transition. So this is a quick highlight of some of the different resources available in terms of local information. Happy to share any of these links. and do Q&A as we get to the end of this. I'm going to now transition it back over, and I believe Abby has some more from the state side.
That sounds great, Monica. Get ready to answer some questions when we're done there, because that's a great, it's sort of like the essence of the All Hazards Consortium and the Resilience Exchange Summit, right? Exchanging, and you did a lot of exchanging of data sets and great resources that are available. So I hope we can get to those some of those questions as well. Our last panelist, as Monica mentioned, is Abby Browning, who is Chief of the Private Sector and NGO Coordination within the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. And Abby conducts cross-sector exercises for hurricane season preparedness as well. You think, well, hurricanes in West Coast. Yep, they threaten California as well. They sort of get the whole bag. So Abby's also going to talk to us about what the state's doing as far as wildfire risk reduction and perhaps some other things as well. And Abby, I just want to say that with all the extreme events happening in California, we truly appreciate both you being able to take the time to join us, and as well as Monica as well. And just appreciate that you're able to peel yourself away at least for an hour to participate in this session. So Abby, it's all yours, and we'll go to Q&A after you. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dave. I'm not going to be sharing a screen because honestly, all of the information that you heard from the previous three panelists, including Monica and her collection of data, is stuff that we use in the state of California. And so I just thought I would go through a little bit of what it is that we do and what we've done thus far for this wildfire risk reduction, and how data plays an important role. Again, thank you for having me, and apologies if this seems a little rushed, but like Dave said, we've been under quite the disasters that's been happening that were a bit unexpected. A lot of people think, how does that affect our drought? We have some water now. It's a common little joke that people say too many people were praying for water, and the answer came really fast. Lots of water and lots of snow that has dropped in California, but that has created quite a few cascading events, which I'll talk about in a moment. Over the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, the state of California has spent billions of dollars in investing in communities and wildfire risk reduction. We utilize data. We partner with different agencies. We partner with NASA. We partner with the National Weather Service. We partner with the U.S. Geological Survey, as well as our own UC system, the UC research system, to look at areas that are high threat for wildfire. And then we invest money into mitigation efforts. I know all of you are aware of the hazard mitigation dollars and the BRIC dollars that come down through the federal government. We utilize our state money to try to make it a little bit easier for communities, localities in California to access that money. It's great that the feds offer these kind of grant opportunities, but they usually are a 75-25 match. You have to have the matching, and having the matching for millions of dollars is hard to do. And even having the upfront capital for that is hard to do for some of our more fire prone areas. So California has developed programs to help communities access that money. It's Prepare California. And so that was very successful, and it has been over the past few years, hundreds of millions of dollars going into that effort to get more federal dollars and more mitigation projects off the ground throughout California. We have also invested in capacity building on the local level, because it's one thing to have grants that are operational and that are accessible to our communities in California, including the tribal communities that we have in California. But it's another thing to have someone that is that has the time and that is educated in the respect that they can apply for those grants. that's a whole nother ball of yarn that a lot of people don't think about. It's like, yeah, of course grants are available, but somebody's got to apply and they have to do it well in order to get these grants, and then follow through with the administrative piece of it, because it is taxpayer dollars. And so we have a responsibility as government officials to make sure that they are being spent wisely. And so California has invested a lot in that. People are our number one concern. And so we do look at the WUI, the wildland urban interface areas. We have partnered with the U.S. Forest Service. I believe the number, and please don't quote me, it's like 48 or 49% of land in California is actual federal land. And so we've partnered with them to do mitigation on not only California state lands, but also federal lands. And then during the disaster itself, during the fires itself, like Monica had shown some of those cameras that are set up, we take in all kinds of information, all kinds of data, not only from the public sector to the different government agencies, the Department of Defense. We utilize a lot of their satellite technology. And then we utilize real-time data that's coming out. We partner with others to know where the fire is and where can we pre-position our resources, where can we put the different firefighters and make sure that these communities are taken care of. We've, over the past couple of years, it's been said that we were going to have extreme fire seasons. We did have bad fire seasons, don't get me wrong, but it didn't come near as what was predicted. And I fully believe that it's the mitigation efforts that were put into place through all of these data-driven decisions that were made. Some of the things that we've just developed recently, we are developing a wildfire forecast and threat intelligent integration center. That's called the WIFTIC. It's being staffed up as we speak. The legislation was passed in 2019. I believe in 2021, we received funding for it. And as I'm sure you know, things have been happening since 2020, 2021, 2022. And so it's really hard to get these government offices off the ground. What this center is aimed at doing is coordinating all of this data. We in the state of California, we have our office, which is the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, but we also have our California Natural Resources Agency, which is where CAL FIRE is located, is also where the Department of Water Resources is located, et cetera. We also have the Department of Technology that handles a lot of our technological aspects, it's AI, fun things like that. And then we have several other different entities like the California Public Utilities Commission that monitor and deal with wildfire threats and concerns throughout the year. And so this entity, this center, is aimed at corralling all of that together. We've already been in discussions with quite a few academic groups as well as private sector, like for example, Lockheed Martin. They have a lot of excellent things that they can bring to the table to help us with these decisions. NASA, JPL has been in discussions with my leadership and my colleagues on joining this WIFTIC Center in order to better serve the people of California. And honestly, we don't stop at the borders. We do spend our money in California because it's California taxpayer dollars, but fires don't know state lines, just like fires don't know county lines or city jurisdictions. And so we often will share and discuss with our colleagues in Oregon and Idaho and Washington and Nevada and so forth on this, just like we do with our EMAC, and we send personnel and folks come here. And finally, well, not finally, excuse me. One of the cool things that we just deployed last year is called a FIRIS. It's the Fire Integrated Real-Time Intelligence System. And this is, from what I understand, one of the first of its kind. It is a drone technology that is able to capture information and data, real-time fire lines, et cetera, through the smoke. which has always been an issue, is that the heavier the smoke is the harder to tell where these lines are, where these threatened homes are, if there are any pockets of folks that are stuck. It's very difficult to see through the smoke. And so this is a partnership with the UC San Diego Wildfire Institute, and it was deployed last year. And you can go online and look it up. It's FIRIS, and you can see some really cool video shots that they've done on it. I highly recommend that. And then finally, I would be remiss to say that even though this is what we're talking about is fire reduction, as was mentioned, California had 9 atmospheric rivers recently, and the water and the flooding is a big issue that we are responding to and recovering from as we speak, with the federal declaration and going out and mucking out homes, etc. But a real concern of ours while we are thinking about it is the water that has penetrated the ground in these burn scars. And so we have been utilizing the USGS and the California Geological Survey in order to know where these different burn scars were, how the water that fell impacted the burn scars, how deep the water went, and what is the likelihood of landslides that will happen. We've had quite a few that has landed on roads, but of course our largest concern is communities, these landslides that may affect communities. And so we are constantly and actively doing mitigation efforts to try to stop that from happening. But the way that we have been able to utilize science and technology to find those things out has been really fascinating. During this most recent event, we have our Unified Coordination Group that sets up, which is basically the governor and his cabinet leadership, to talk about our response, how we're going to bring state and federal partners together to respond to these events. And one of the key reports that we had at every meeting was from the state climatologist to talk about what are the issues we're seeing, what is this going to do? Here comes this next atmospheric river. It's going to drop this much rain at this place, and this is where all of the this is where the burn scar is. This is what we're watching, and this is a concern. The same with our snowpack. Our snowpack, I believe, is like 150% now, which is amazing. But at the same time, what if a warm front comes through? What if something comes through that causes it to melt a little bit faster than we want it to? Then we need to be concerned about flooding and our pathway for that water to come down into our reservoirs, and make sure we're ready for that. So there's a lot of things that go on, and all of the data and all of the information that is put out there by our partners, both private sector and public sector, we take it all in order to make the best decisions. And like I said, our #1 goal is the safety of Californians or folks inside of California as the event is happening, and then property as we move forward. So having said that, apologize I don't have any slides, but I thought it would be better if I just kind of talked about what we do. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I always look to our partners like NASA or the National Weather Service and the California Resiliency Alliance for the science and the actual data. It's amazing what they can do. So thank you.
Abby, thank you very much. You have so much to talk about. It really doesn't matter if you have slides or not. Just seeing you and listening to all the things you have to go through is quite impressive, and all the things that California is doing as well. I just wanted to ask a question of you, and then I'm going to go down the list and ask a couple of questions. What's your, we talk a lot about data. We talk a lot about data driving decisions, and we talk about AI and machine learning and all that sort of stuff. What's your biggest challenge in the state of California when it comes to data? Is it getting it out to people? Is it just processing it internally? What are your biggest challenges?
Well, for me in particular, my role here is coordination with the private sector. It's basically like external affairs, except for on steroids. It's that and beyond, you know. And I'm always concerned about privacy issues, taking in data, leaving data, etc. It's one thing to give out our data to the world because it's government data. There are some concerns of security, which absolutely, but for the most part, state of California data is unclassified. It's things that you can have. But if I were to get data from, say, Google or Apple or Facebook or something like that, it's a privacy concern. My negative brain automatically goes to the yes, of course, we want this data for responding to a disaster, but then who else is going to get this data? And do I really want them to? As a private citizen or as a taxpayer, I'm like, maybe I don't want you to know where I'm at all times. You know, it's one thing if Apple knows where I'm at all times because I have a phone on me, but it's another thing if the government's tracking me. So I gotta manage all of those concerns with the greater good, and then work with our partners to ensure that if they do give us things, how it will be used, and then the privacy concerns. So that's my biggest thing that I think about.
No, I appreciate that answer. And Jessica, I wanted to ask you, when you think about, you know, and we work a lot with the All Hazards Consortium, we work a lot with their stakeholders that cut across multiple sectors. What's your vision for how NASA data, because we typically don't use NASA data in a real-time environment, but what's your vision for how NASA data could be used to help people like Abby in California, or, you know, any transportation or medical supply or utility trucks that are trying to move across the country?
Yeah, I mean, we have started thinking about this more because it is not just NASA data. So maybe the question should be more, we're hoping that some of the NASA science and technology, some of the modeling, for instance, we also work with the Wildfire group in San Diego State. Like, how can some of this, you know, real-time modeling, real-time communication, aerial support, you know, airborne science and drone support be used such that it is actual real-time data and not, you know, 2 or 3 hours, not, you know, a week later, not just historical lessons learned, so that you can manage the next wildfire, next natural hazard event better. And in fact, one of the questions I was noticing was, because I'm actually interested in the question too, was the very first question about the remote small communities and how to get information to them. And that's actually the type of question that if someone had an answer to, NASA would be very interested in hearing what they think their science and technology answer to that is, and what data needs are, and how the kinds of data that we offer could augment that type of solution. Yeah, so I think it's thinking more out, you know, it's more than just our satellite constellation. It is really about what we can bring to the table as, you know, the kinds of thinkers who tend to solve impossible problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm glad you turned to that next question, because that was the one that I was going to ask. And I wanted, Heath, your input. I wanted, you know, Abby, yours, Monica, you know, you're the link, the link queen for the chat here today, putting in a lot of the links to the data. But that is the question, right? How do we reach vulnerable communities? How do we reach the ones that are typically underserved? They might not have the technology. They might not, you know, be on the grid, but we know that people live in certain vulnerable areas. How do we get information to those communities so they can get out of the way when a wildfire is coming, or they can be more educated and informed using the tools that we have at the federal, state, and local levels? So we'll just go around the horn here. Heath, I'll give you a chance to chime in on that, and then we'll go around to Monica, Jessica, and Abby.
Yeah, real quickly, we have basically doubled our efforts on social behavioral science. I can sit here all day and conjecture and speak from a very comfortable seat. But agent-based modeling, what people do in rural areas across not just a wildfire event, but a flooding event that's going on, several studies have been launched. And so I think that is an unanswered question to our satisfaction, to the public's satisfaction, definitely to congressional satisfaction. But aside from it's a problem to be examined, the best thing we have are frontline incident meteorologists that attend public meetings, that partner with the CAL FIRE teams when they do happen, in response at least, maybe not at a heavy event, but we're there to answer those questions for the smaller communities.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Heath. And I know there's a lot of social science activities going on within the Weather Service and more broadly across NOAA as well. Monica, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely two audiences in this. I mean, the question is geared more towards getting the information to the people to leave quickly if there's a fire. But there's also the element of access to the information for the emergency planners, for the emergency responders in those small communities, which may or may not by that time have infrastructure disrupted. So how are they getting these information feeds in that sense, or even just becoming aware of them because of capacity constraint resources and not having the time to dig through all of these websites to see what's out there. In regards to the communication of the messaging of that there's a threat with the local communities, I think Heath really captured on it that there's a lot of research going on, but there is not, and I'm not sure if there will ever be, here's the best practice right way to do it, because the small communities all have their local nuances. They have their different trust levels and their different channels and flows of networks and communications. And with networks, meaning kind of the social networks internal to that community. And so the right answer is going to be for the right answer for that community, not a right answer for small communities. And I think those are one of the challenges that we're going to be facing, is there's that desire for a simple answer, and there's not a simple answer for this one.
Yeah. Abby, what are your thoughts? Do you have any programs going on within the state of California? Any efforts to make sure you can reach those the underserved communities?
You just set me right up. That is absolutely we do. So this is a big issue for all of us. Is how do you reach the people? And in emergency management, redundancy is the name of the game. We do everything every which way we could possibly think of. Even some places they literally have people that are assigned to go door to door and knock on the door and say, "Let's go. It's burning. We got to run." And so we really encourage communities to think about who your neighbors are, think about who you're looking for. We have neighbor to neighbor programs, but the state of California, we're very big. We got about 40 million people here. And so that's why a lot of things are very locally driven. As Monica was mentioning, one community is completely different from another community. We have a recent program here in California called the Listos California Grant Program that provides grants to community-based organizations to reach some of those more vulnerable populations with not only preparedness, but response and recovery. Some of those populations in California are not necessarily connected to the government, or they don't want to be connected to the government for one reason or another. But that doesn't negate our responsibility to get the word out. And so we use those trusted partners on the ground. For example, right now in some of our disaster resource centers, some of the population coming in are wary of government. They are the underserved, the populations might not be English speakers, et cetera, that need help, but are afraid to get help. Yeah. And so we have tapped several of our community-based and faith-based organizations, provided funding to them so they can get out there and get the message to them. So we're trying every different way, but there is no simple solution. And if a new thing comes out from research, we'll try that next. Just constant, nimble is the way to go, and redundancy is the name of the game. As much we can do to get information to people.
Yeah, that's really, it is so important to get that information out. And I'm wondering, and I'm looking at a question in the Q&A here, so I'll kind of pull that together. Basically, they're saying, wow, there's so much data available, right? So many people are putting their data sets out there and making them available. From the training side, and I've spoken with emergency managers and decision makers and all that stuff, and they say there's so much data out there. How do we even get a handle on what's out there? Is there any training programs, or are there any training programs either in the state of California or federally, I don't know, within FEMA, that could focus on the access and use of trusted data to drive or at least influence decision making? Abby?
Well, not that I know of, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I don't know everything, unfortunately. But it's an ever-changing thing. And while I don't want to depreciate myself or my colleagues, the really, really smart people are at the universities, and they're putting all these things together. And that's why we partner with those folks, the UC system. That's why we partner with private sector. That's why we partner with these specialized agencies that are smarter than we are to bring this all together. So there may be training. I'm sure there will be training if there's not already. But it's constantly evolving in California. And so you just have to figure out, what do you want to know? And if that's what you want to know, I guarantee you'll find a data source for it. It's trying to look at it from the other side instead of coming at the fire hose full blast at you with all this data going, okay, I need this, this, and this. Where do I find it? And that's kind of how we're looking at it right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Jessica, I was just going to ask you, I know that NASA has the RSET program where they use to train folks on how to use particular types of satellite data and things like that. Do you see in the future any efforts to train emergency managers as to how to use not just NASA data, but a whole federal suite of data?
So we would love that. I mean, that would be something that, of course, we would want to partner with other, federal agencies and potential local agencies to tailor make that training. But I think that in this program that I'm representing, the Wildland Fire Management Program, this is the type of project that would be very applicable to our goals, which is really thinking about how to use parts of NASA's Earth observations, but linking it to community needs. So what Abby was saying about some of these vulnerable communities who are absolutely impacted by fire and of course impacted by smoke, NASA's technology that was able to knock an asteroid off of its path is not the technology that's going to be used to speak to those communities, right? So we need other kinds of intelligence and savviness and connections to community. But what do we have that could be helpful? Like if so a lot of the links that Monica was sharing, let's say that we could predict a week out what the air quality was going to be, and we could work with the National Weather Service and NOAA to have different scenarios, and the community leaders know that, and the emergency managers know that, and then give better levels of accuracy as we get closer to that date. That's the kind of linkages that we would like to see. And then of course, as we get to that date, the satellites could then, and the drones and the airborne could tell us exactly when the fire is occurring or has occurred, and where the smoke is heading now, and how that matches up with our models, right? So and I think that NOAA and NASA have often teamed up to do really interesting and powerful smoke and atmospheric chemistry projects and campaigns to learn more, to improve those modeling efforts. But we really now want to get that back to the management community. So I very much want to hear, and our program wants to hear from the management community, from state level offices, and from these communities with the vulnerable populations. What do you absolutely need, and how do we solve it? So I'll stop talking, but thanks, Dave. That's a great question.
No, I appreciate that. And you know, we're at 2:30, but I can't leave the session here because we're going to be turning our attention to floods and hurricanes to ask Heath you one last question. And Heath, that last question, I know you're saying, oh shoot, I thought I was going to get out of here. But that last question is what's new? What's new coming from the Weather Service with regard to wildfires and wildfire services? What are you guys working on? I know you have committees internally, and you're thinking, what can we provide? Is there anything that you can give us to look forward to from the standpoint of operational services from the Weather Service? You have 30 seconds.
Okay. New is what Abby was alluding to. We are looking at the fire environment. Gone are the days to approach things in stovepipes. Weather is here, fire danger is here, fuels are here. All three data sets are available. Now you go make sense of it. So the efforts to center things in California, I think those concepts will expand. We're thinking about those things. We're trying to update systems on the fire agency side to not we, NOAA, but our partners are, for more consolidated attempts to assess the fire environment. So I know that's a generalized concept, but that's kind of the only way we're going to go to the next level is fire environment and integration.
Well, that's great. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to have to call this session here, but I really appreciate you, Jessica and Abby and Monica, Heath, for you guys participating in this session. It's so important. And we're going to continue the conversation. We have Friday telecons every Friday within the All Hazards Consortium for the sensitive information sharing environment. And we talk a lot about wildfires, even more as that threat grows.